So that sounds pretty good, right? I mean, that doesn't sound too bad. Just by a raise of hand, who has heard the story of what happened at the ranch? Okay, that's a pretty good amount. And so you know that my family had been ranching in the southern Nevada area for 137 years. Our rights are well documented with the state of Nevada. In fact, interesting thing, if you go back to where my dad's water rights are, and you go to the state registry, it shows that the priority date on the actual filing of the original water was 1890. And we've held those rights since then, and they've been filed in the Nevada registry, water rights registry. And just so you know, the water rights are, the way Nevada does it is that if you own stock watering rights, then you own the right to forage so many head according to that stock watering right. So like he might own a forage right, or excuse me, a water right, and then he owns the right to forage, to graze, say like 150 head around that water. And that's how Nevada works. Well, we have those rights and have had those rights since they've been passed down from generation to generation, or they were purchased from other ranchers, and that's how we established those rights. And in 21 years ago, the BLM came in and said basically that those rights are not yours, that this land is ours, and you don't have the right to graze there. And they actually had, through regulations and so forth, that tried to put the ranchers out of business. And they used the excuse of the desert tortoise, saying that it was endangered. And they said, basically, your ranches are going to become the mitigation area for the desert tortoise. We're going to put them there to protect them. And desert tortoise can't live with cattle, supposedly, right? They've been doing it a long, long time. And so, therefore, the cattle have to leave. And the ranchers put up a fight, of course, and they created an association, and they started studying their rights, and they found out something that was real wonderful. And that was that the federal government doesn't have rights to these lands. They don't have the right or the authority given to them through the Constitution to own or control land inside a state. That's what they found. And that was 21 years ago. And the ranchers debated back and forth of whether they could make this stand against the federal government or not. And it came down to, out of all the Cattlemen's Association in Nevada, it came down to two ranchers said we must stand on principle, which is the Constitution. And we must stand there, or we will be swept away. And those two individuals, and all the rest of the ranchers said, no, there's no way we can beat the federal government. There's no way. They'll just wipe us out. They'll take our heritage, they'll take our livelihood, and if we stand strong enough, they'll even take our lives. And that's what they said. They were afraid. And they said, no, we're going to continue to try to find another way through the courts or through lawyers and all those methods. And a rancher by the name of Keith Ney and another rancher by the name of Ammon Bundy were the only two that said we must stand on constitutional principles. And when they left that meeting that night, there was a great division. There was a division. No longer did the Cattlemen's Association want to associate themselves with Ammon Bundy and Keith Ney. And no longer did Keith Ney and Ammon Bundy want to associate themselves with the Cattlemen's Association. And they said, we are standing, Ammon Bundy and Keith Ney said, we are going to stand on constitutional principles. And we're going to defend our rights through natural law that our God has given us. And so over the 20 plus years, we have seen, I have been a witness of that growing up and seeing it. I have been a witness of one by one by one by one, the ranchers being put out of business. And now today, that just give you some numbers, there was 53 ranchers in Clark County where my dad grazes cattle, where my dad's ranch is. And unfortunately, Keith Ney passed away about 15 years ago. And my dad has kind of helped his wife ranch and kind of a little bit of assumed that ranch. But so he was no longer able to stand. So out of those 52 or 53 ranchers, there is only one rancher left. And that is Ammon Bundy, my dad. They put every single rancher out of business. Now, Clark County wasn't unique. They did this all over the county, or all over the state, and then they did it all over the western state. The same things happened here in Arizona. If you, just to give you the numbers, there's only 2 ranchers in the United States today, 2 ranchers that do not pay a grazing fee to use their own rights. Okay? And the other rancher's name is Wade Hage and Jr. His dad passed away, had a heart attack fighting this fight. And he's in Nye County, so he wasn't in and the reason he got it was because they got in a legal battle, and the Bureau of Land Management was so horrific in their actions that the judge had to rule towards the rancher. I mean, it was horrible. There was all kinds of corruption going on. It was so obvious that the judge ruled, and so they've been able to ranch without a grazing fee for almost as long as my dad. But my dad has just sat there and said, you don't have the constitutional authority to charge me for a fee or for a right that is mine. And he's willing to pay a tax, right, just like we do, but he's not willing to pay somebody for his right. And just I want to get that clarify that a little bit. So let me just back up a little bit. I don't know if I want to. Oh, you do got it here. He's got me hooked up. So let me just talk a little bit, and then I'll bring it up. So let's talk about rights, if I can. Then I'll go a little bit more into the story. But all of us have rights, correct? And we have God-given rights, but then we also can go out and get property rights and those things. And I'd like everybody here to understand 3 things. One is how are rights established, how are rights transferred, and then how are rights maintained. Because this is what we learned 30 years ago as a family and others, and this is what has allowed us or saved us and made it possible for us to still ranch today. And I think that by me explaining this, that you'll hopefully understand. So first of all, how are rights established? Okay, let's just talk about like private property or property right. Well, a lot of people think, well, they're established because I bought them. No, that's not how they're established. That's how they were transferred to you. Okay, originally they were established by what they call prior appropriation and beneficial use. Meaning, I was the first there, and I'm benefiting from it. So therefore, I gain the right by using it, because I'm benefiting from it. And just think about like how this valley was established, right? People came into the valley, they didn't buy it. They came into the valley, they said, we were here first, and this is our area, and we were using it. And it wasn't until later, like when the state was formed or when some government recognized, and then basically then the rights became documented. But that's how rights were established. All rights in all the world were established that way. Because this is the natural law. This is the way that rights are established. Okay? And then, so again, prior appropriation and beneficial use. Now, I'll give you another example. It still goes on today, but not so much with land rights and that type of stuff. But I own a trucking company, a truck repair facility or preventive maintenance where we take care of commercial trucks. And over the past 2 years, we've been developing a software. Okay, which is, oh man, talk about a pain anybody who's been involved in it. And I recognize that the same thing with developing this software is the same way that other rights. This software is mine, okay? But I didn't purchase it. I mean, what I did is I went and my first ideas, my ideas are mine. And I was able to capture them. And then I'm using them and benefiting from them. And if I was ever to go to a court of law, I would go, because someone was trying to take my rights, I would say, hey, look, those were my ideas. And I've been using those for a long, long time and benefiting from them. They were mine. And see how I just established the right to that software. And I could transfer that software. I could sell it, but that's the next part of it. Most of us in here, if not all of us, especially with our private properties, they've been transferred to us through barter or trade. We paid money for it, right? And that's how we got a piece of somebody's rights that they established through prior appropriation or beneficial use. Okay, and that could also be inherited, or it could be what's called another way that someone can transfer or take rights from another is through what's called adverse possession. Now, I want you to remember this adverse possession, okay? Because adverse possession is the act of going and where someone goes and claims somebody else's rights, begins to use it, and then over time it becomes theirs. Adverse possession, okay? Now, who here believes that adverse possession is a law, a legal law here in Arizona? Is adverse possession a legal law? Yes. Absolutely. Raise your hand. I think it's 5 years. Now, correct me, Shane, I don't know if you know. Is it 5 years? Anyway, it varies in each state, but basically, like in Nevada, it's 5 years. If someone moved into, like, on a piece of property or even in your house, and they lived there for 5 years, and you didn't oppose that, guess what? It becomes theirs. A lot of people recognize this by fences. Like if a fence goes over an edge, right? If it goes over, like, let's say you're 10 feet into someone's property, but they don't dispute it, over 5 to 7 years in Arizona, I believe, it becomes your property. Inside that fence becomes your property. It's called adverse possession. Okay? Now you might think, oh, that's a horrible law. But think about this. The reason why we have adverse possession, and hopefully I'm not boring you, but I think you'll understand why I'm sharing these things with you. But the reason why adverse possession is actually to your benefit is because it protects you from someone. Let's say you move into a property and you're living there for a long time, and then someone from 60 years ago comes up with a deed and says, that's my property. You say, nah, I've been using it. I've been using it, and I own it now. See, adverse possession then works towards you. So these are all natural law, common law. All these things that I'm talking about, they're actually the way that life really is. And I'll give you another example. Let's say you're standing in line, right? Let's say the line is 100 people long, and you've been there for 3 hours. Okay? Well, who has the right to be in the first in line? The first person there, right? We all accept that. It's natural law. We accept that person got there first, so therefore that person deserves the right to be there. Okay? And then second, third, fourth, and so on. That's called prior appropriation. Okay? Now, let's say the third or fourth person, or even the first, it doesn't matter, in line, let's say they get out of line and they go somewhere. Well, what happens to that person's right? He loses it, right? So he stops benefiting from it, and therefore he loses his right to be there. Beneficial use, right? And then let's say someone comes in and butts in, and let's say he's 100 pounds bigger than everybody else in the line. Comes and butts in, right? And if no one does anything about it, what happens over time? It becomes his right. Right? It becomes his right. And everybody's like, well, you know, he got it, that ignorant, rotten, da 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 da. But it becomes his right. But If he butts in and we decide to do something about it, right, then we have the right to call on everybody else, and everybody else realizes that's wrong, and they gather together and they kick him out. That's called the right, proper form of government, right? Because that is what government is for. Government is for when someone's rights are violated, the people unite together and organize, and they correct the right, or correct the wrong, excuse me, and protect the right. Right? Right? Okay. All right. So again, hopefully I'm not boring you, but I think you'll understand. So we talked about how rights are established. We talked about how rights are transferred, and I actually talked about how rights are maintained. But I'm going to clarify it a little bit more because I want you to please understand this, because this is what we must do in order to restore our rights and in order to maintain and protect them. And that is three things. And this is natural law. This isn't coming from Ammon Bundy. This is coming from the way the world is. And common law draws from this too. We must, in order to maintain rights, we must first claim them. We have to claim them. We have to say they're ours. And the reason they're ours is because I bought them through transferring, or I gained them through prior appropriation and beneficial use. Okay? Well, prior appropriation. So we have to claim them. And that's what we do when we title our land. That's what we do when we get deeds, all of that. All that's doing is just a form of claiming. Okay? Because natural law basically says you have to claim it. The second thing is you have to use it and benefit from it. There has to be beneficial use. If you do not use it, then you cannot claim it. Okay? In some way, and that doesn't matter. I mean, you could be renting it, you could be, growing something on it, you could be living on it, you could just be enjoying it. Okay? So you have to claim it, and you have to use it, and then you must defend it. Okay? Amen. You have to defend it. You have to claim it, you have to use it, and you have to defend it. If you do not do those three things, it's required. You have to do it or you lose your rights. And just look at the history of this country over the past 100 years. Has that not what happened to us? We forgot what our rights are. Half of us, or not even half, the majority of this country don't even understand what their rights are, let alone claim them. And then they're not using them either. And then they've gone in and let other people claim them. They haven't defended them. Amen. Okay? And I can give you hundreds and hundreds of examples of this. Of people not claiming their rights. People not using their rights. And then they're not willing to defend them. And I will say this. As much as I respect the order of this country and the laws and whatever else, I don't respect them all, but as much as I do, rights are not maintained in the courts. Amen. Yeah. They are maintained by claiming, using, and defending. And yeah, you can use the courts to help you defend them. But that's not the only avenue you can take. And that's not really what is required. It's required that you defend them and say whatever it takes. These are mine, see? Let me give you an example of the Bundy Ranch, because it's a good example, right? My dad, from as long as I can ever remember, stood at the top of the mountain, sometimes literally, but he basically stood and said, "This is my ranch. And why the hell would someone think they have the right to come and take it? Amen. Right? This is my ranch. I inherited it and I purchased it." He purchased a lot of the ranch rights from other ranchers. And then he said, and he always continues to use it. He always has used it. I must use it, he says. I have to use it. And so he uses it, and uses it to the benefit of himself, his family, and also he provides a great commodity for the American people. Okay? And so he uses it. And then when 200 fully armed agents come down to destroy our rights and our family through excessive force, or as much force possible, my dad was determined to defend it. Amen. To his life.
Amen. Yeah.
And that is the only reason that my dad still ranches today. All the other ranchers were gone. They're gone. Completely gone. In Clark County. And all the other ranchers, other than Wayne Hage in the western United States, well, in all the United States, all of them, guess what they're doing? They're paying a fee, a grazing fee, to use somebody else's rights because they lost theirs. They're paying a fee saying, this is the federal government's, even though my family's been here for 150 years, and I established this right through prior appropriation and beneficial use, and it was passed down to me, but no, I am not willing to claim it, and but I want to still use it, so can I use it your right? You see that? Yep. And now can you see why my dad said, hell no, I'm not going to pay a grazing fee?
Amen.
That's why. Because as soon as he pays that grazing fee, guess what he just said? Yeah. It's not my right anymore.
Amen.
Okay? Yeah. And that is why we don't pay our grazing fee. It's not that we're trying to evade taxes. Nevada doesn't have a tax for grazing. We would pay it willingly. In fact, we want to, because we feel if there was a tax by the county and the state and the state would be mutually invested in us. But they don't have a tax for us to pay. But they do have a way for us to claim it, and it's been on the record since 1890. I hope that makes sense. And I will say this, that in order to defend, it takes a lot of courage. Because, as we talked about, when you're in line and that bully butts in, and that bully is a 1,000-pound gorilla called the federal government. It just broke out of its constitutional cage because the people left the gate unlocked. And he jumps in line and he starts pounding on that next person. And the representatives of all these people in their power are not willing to stand and unite the people and protect that one person, and just sits back there and watches that 1,000-pound gorilla just continue to pound. That person has to make a decision. Either he's going to run and lose his rights, or he's going to fight and do whatever he can to defend that 1,000-pound gorilla. And if he has to do it himself, he'll do it himself. And that was Ammon Bundy. But one thing that was beautiful that happened, and you know this, that as soon as he started standing, and got up off the ground and stood up in front of that gorilla and said, I don't care if you kill me, but you're not taking my place in line. Everybody else recognized that.
Amen.
And they started coming. And they chased off the 1,000-pound gorilla. And that, my friends, is what we must do. But it takes people who are willing to stand for their right and pay everything for it. And then, only until they're willing to give it all, will people unite with them and follow them and fight for them. And that is the way it is. And I can give you a lot more stories about what happened at the ranch. Yes, Randy?
Ammon, would you mind just taking 5 minutes and reviewing that story? There could be a few people here that don't know it very well, some of our visitors.
Okay.
Absolutely. Just 5 or 10 minutes.
So, absolutely. So, just I might not be able to do it in 5-10 minutes, but I'll do my best. So I give you a little bit of setting, basically what happened. And March 27th, they came in and they set up a military base, basically. I know it wasn't a military base. I understand that they don't have authority to organize a military, but they did. Mercenaries, anyway, and they organized them, and they came into the ranch, and they developed this base, and it was just like a military base. It had communication towers, perimeters, sniper points, barriers, all of that. And around 200 agents came in. Well, there was actually about, from what we can gather, about 50% of them were agents from 5 different agencies. Yeah, there's BLM, FBI, Park Service, U.S. Park Service, U.S. Forest Service, and they came in, and then around the other 50% were actually hired mercenaries. They were actually hired killers, and there was a good amount of them were snipers. They were trained, and I heard terms like pound flesh. I didn't know what that meant. That they came to pound flesh. Well, anybody who knows that, it's a horrible, horrible thing, but that's what they came to do. And they reached out to they had a liaison that reached out to our family. And his job was basically to tell us, and this is in his own words, that if we resist, this will be another Waco or Ruby Ridge. That was their words exactly. They came to kill us. And they came strong and heavy. And they basically, make a long story short, they surrounded the ranch. They locked up all the access points to the ranch. And they had men completely surrounding. They had surveillance equipment. And then they began to gather the cattle and destroy the water rights on the mountain. And I told you, I just explained why they wanted to destroy the water rights. Right? That was the link to my dad's right to be on that. And they knew that, so they wanted to destroy those rights and remove all the water, remove all that infrastructure that's been up there over 100 years, and remove the cattle, and then basically eliminate his usage, his beneficial use on that. And they did a pretty good job of it for several days. They on Sunday. They beat my brother literally to the ground, about 10 of them. Meanwhile, they had M16s and assault rifles, had our wives and our children, heads, while they're beating my brother to the ground. I wasn't there, actually. And then, yeah.
A question, when you say they, what agency coordinated all that, and under what authority were they claiming they had the rights to act on?
Okay. Primarily the Bureau of Land Management, BLM. They were the leading agency there. And what authority they were basing it on is basically federal code that they had filed in the Federal Registry without legislation. You might understand that, right? They just basically file whatever they want in the Federal Registry with it, and then it sits there for 90 days and becomes federal law without legislation or the proper way that laws are supposed to be made. And so they made these laws. They've been making them for a long, long time, but one of the laws that they kept quoting was that we didn't have our First Amendment rights to protest on federal land. That's what they said. And we continued to protest, and that's why my brother got beat to the ground. He had an iPad and he was filming them. They called it protest, so they gang beat him to the ground by their authority, and they even would continue to keep saying this. They had the code memorized, the federal code, and they would read it, say it. They'd say it to us while they were beating us down, throwing us on the ground, while they were throwing body slamming women to the ground and sicking their dogs on us, while they were tasing us. That's what was going on. They were saying the federal code does not allow you to express your First Amendment rights here. So therefore, we have the right to abuse you. And they did. They abused us. I think I would be ungrateful to not express to you, though, the Lord's hand in all of this. Okay? If I could express to you anything here tonight, that is that God lives and that He is willing to protect the people who will stand for what's right.
Amen. Yes, He will.
He will sustain us. And I don't say that out of just to say it. It was very real. There was times that the Lord's Spirit was so strong during that week that it would take our breath away. He was there, my friends. And He was very curious of what the American people were going to do with their freedoms. And He gave us opportunity, and He protected us many, many times. I could give you an incident that personally, where when I was tased 3 times, the video says 4, but I know of 3 for sure, I didn't go to the ground. Why? Even though my upper body was in complete convulsions, and I was shaking, and my brain wasn't even working right, but I felt a strength grab like my lower legs, and I could still feel to this day I still can remember to this day how the soles of my boots felt against the asphalt and how solid I was against the ground. And I know that I was sustained that day. I could also tell you about a dream that my brother had on Tuesday. And that dream laid out exactly what was going to happen on Saturday. And during that dream, he understood where everybody was supposed to be. And that's how it happened. We understood what was happening. I could also tell you that these federal agencies, they thought that there was a mole among them. Because we understood what they were going to do and how they were going to act before they did it. Because the Lord and His Spirit was telling us. And it was very real. And I am just grateful to have been a part of it. To have that experience is just amazing. And to just feel that. On Tuesday there was, when I rolled into town, or into the valley, by the way, my dad, about 15 days before anybody ever came to the ranch to help us, my dad had an understanding that we needed to prepare for thousands of people. And so, just to give you an idea of the Lord's involvement here, He had that understanding, and we went out and bought pallets and pallets of water, bottled water. We went and bought these great big grills and tons of food. Because the Lord told my dad, or just whispered to him, hey, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to come. You're going to need to be able to accommodate them. So get your tents and get your food and get your water prepared. And so that's what we were doing. We weren't worrying about what they're doing, building their compound. We're preparing, doing what the Lord has to do the best we could. We're certainly not anywhere perfect. But we were doing the best we could. And look what happened. Thousands and thousands of people. And know what they needed? They needed water, and they needed food, and they needed tents. And we had it for them. We had a place prepared for them. We had fields cleared out. We had all these things we had porta potties. All these things were already there. And anyway, I just want to tell you that if we stand and to protect our rights and are willing, that the Lord will sustain us. And we don't have anything to fear. Nothing to fear. Now, before I run out of time here, I do want to tie this a little bit together, and then I'll answer some questions. But I want to help you realize what our federal government mostly is doing. And I say our federal government mostly because we have state, county, and other governments doing the same thing. But our federal government is the violators of this. The Constitution protects this natural law, protects our rights, right? Well, they understand this. They've opposed it. But what they've come down and actually, we know they've been taking rights away, right? Right? I mean, they've been doing it. It's almost rampant nowadays, okay? But the way they've been doing it is through the natural law. And the rest of us are running to the courts going, protect us, help us, help us. And we just keep losing our rights, losing our rights, losing our rights. Meanwhile, they're going out claiming, using, and defending. They're going on to they're claiming our land, they're claiming our resources, and then they start using them by leasing them back to us, or by selling them to Chinese corporations, or by somehow they're beneficially using them. And then when anybody tries to oppose them, they defend them. And I know that puts us in a bad situation then, as Americans. But the only way to get out of it is to do the same thing.
Amen.
To claim, to use, and defend. And we use the courts if we can. But if the courts won't protect our rights, then we must unite together, like we did at the Bundy Ranch, and protect them ourselves. Does anybody have any questions?
On that card, it said, where are you at now? Does your family have an email list that you're keeping for patriots willing to sign up, say, hey, if we need you in a moment's notice, are you ready to come again? Because we were all kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Last we heard, your family was being told, we're going to come back. We're just leaving for now. Yep. And then we never heard another call to go back out there and help defend your rights.
Well, I say that, thank you.
Ammon, could you repeat that for the crowd?
Yeah, so basically he's wanting to know where we're at, and because the last we were threatened that this isn't over, right? Harry Reid and these agencies threatened that this is not over, and so he's wanting to know the situation and then what to do. So first of all, if I could get the housekeeping part out of the way, if you will go if you will go to the bundyranch.blogspot.com, bundyranch.blogspot.com, and you'll see there that there's right underneath the main header thing, there is a link there that you can link and register. And we're only asking for your first name, your email, your phone number, and then we're asking a few questions, which is like, how much are you willing to participate? Because I want to make it clear that we've had the opportunity to be quite a bit influential to a lot of people. Just to give you an example, I have been flying quite a bit. I've been flying, meeting with legislatures, and my whole spiel is basically that we have to. It's what I just shared with you. We have to claim, use, and defend. We have to use these natural rights to this natural law to get our rights back. And you know what? They're accepting it very, very, very well. Actually, on both sides of the aisle. But what happens is, people, when it really comes down to it, they get weak. And especially the lawyers get a hold of them and say, you can't do that. You got to use case law to protect rights. And they get all weak, and they get all scared. And what we need, and that's why I'm telling you to go to the bundyranch.blogspot.com, what we need is a bunch of people who are willing to act, and call, and email, and come if they need to. And so I encourage you to do that. You could Google Bundy Ranch, and then the blog spot or the blog comes up too. But how many times have I spoken to you here? This is the third time. Three times. It's time to act. Okay? It's time to get and actually register. And I promise you, what I'm planning on doing is when I got a legislature that's in your area that's getting a little weak, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Why don't you guys call him? And every one of you, if you would do that in here, I guarantee would sure that individual up. And he might just stand. But we have to have this together. So I encourage you to please do that. And then I'll keep you informed. My family will keep you informed to go to it. So that's a part of that. Do we have, did that answer? Well, I didn't really answer your question.
What was
right.
the middle word after Bundy Ranch?
.blogspot.
Blog, B-L-O-G?
B-L-O-G, spot.com.
Blog,
BundyRanch.blogspot.com.
Here's one.
S-P-O-T.com.
Well, yeah, okay, right here.
When I listen to TV, over 70% of the media were saying that you weren't paying your grazing rent. Isn't that a lie that they're saying then?
That's correct.
Well, can't we do something about that?
Yeah, so he says over 70% of the media was basically saying we didn't pay our grazing fee, and that was the reason why they were justified in coming out.
Actually, that's not a lie, right? You weren't
Well,
paying your grazing fee. The fact is you weren't obligated to pay the grazing
Well,
fee.
there is
But you're
that.
claiming.
There is that, without doubt. But something that'll probably like really shock you guys. Never have they ever presented a bill to us.
Yeah.
There is no way to pay that. And you know why there's no way to pay that? Because there's not a legal way to actually pay those grazing fees. You know what, though? We don't need a lawyer. Every time we've run to the lawyers, we've lost rights. The only way to maintain rights is to use them, or to claim them, use them, and defend them. Hey, yes.
You're right.
Yeah, right back here.
Is it true about Harry Reid, his developer friends had a lot to do with that, or is that just storyline that got?
No, that's absolutely true. They have made millions, if not billions, on the Nevada land, transferring it from federal to their hands, and then they sell it.
And why doesn't anything ever get done about that?
Because you can't maintain your rights in the courts, especially when it's corrupt. People have tried. Okay? Any other questions? Yeah.
From what I understand, they deliberately destroyed cattle and their water, whether they poisoned it or whatever, and then the cattle drank. Can you explain that? That was obviously retaliatory.
Yeah, they didn't poison the water. What they did is they went up and destroyed the actual where the springs are, the water infrastructure, like the tanks and the water troughs and the pipes that have been up there over 100 years. They destroyed them. They were like literally going to clean them and make them back to their natural state. And then when they gathered the cattle, they were pushing the cattle so hard that they were leaving the baby calves out in the desert, and they were just dying and thirsting to death. Most of them were nursing, and also they were shooting them from the air. They were abusing them. We had a lot of broken legs, dislocated hips, broken backs. So they were extremely abusive to them. So yeah, absolutely. How much time do I have?
About 3 minutes.
Okay.
Is sheriff an elected official defending an individual's rights?
No, we called upon the state. The state would not defend our rights. We called upon the county. They would not defend our rights. And so we had to stand and defend our rights ourselves. And we would not be here today alive to tell this story if the American people hadn't joined us.
Amen.
How big a ranch are you talking about, and what type of grazing fee were they looking at?
It's been, we haven't paid them for so long. I can't tell you about the grazing fee part, but we run on about 260,000 acres actually, and it takes 100 acres to sustain one cow on that desert. Now, just so you know, we're not claiming the land. We're claiming the right to the forage.
Amen.
We out here in the West, it's a multiple use. That way that we claim the forage, the hunter can hunt, the camper can camp, the hiker can hike, the miner can mine. and the rancher can ranch. That's a beautiful thing we have out here in the West.
That's great.
Right?
Have you presented a bill to the federal government for the damage that they've done to the land and to your property?
No, we have not. And we have felt, again, we felt guided by the Spirit not to run to the courts. Okay? But I will say this. There has been some promptings that maybe it's time now. And it will be only not to try to maintain our rights. We're maintaining our rights. It's so that we can educate the American people that there's something really wrong here. And if the courts will bring that about, then we should use that as a tool to educate. And that would be the only reason. I really am out of time.
Yeah, go ahead and wrap it up.
I just want to tell you that the Bundy Ranch is there, and we have, for my whole life, there has always been a threat out there whether we might lose our lives. This isn't the first time we've had snipers on our ranch, just so you know. This isn't the first time that they've tried to chase us down in groups. And we've been ranching out there with this threat over us and this possibility of losing our lives. And is certainly losing our livelihoods. And after this happened, the incident at the Bundy Ranch, we have enjoyed freedoms that we have not enjoyed for generations. I'm telling you, it is wonderful to be free.
Yeah.
We haven't seen not hide nor hair of them. We haven't seen their snipers. We haven't seen their surveillance equipment. We haven't seen their trucks. We haven't seen their letters in the mail, their certified letters and their lawyers. We haven't seen any of them. Now, I'm not saying that's not going to come. But my friends, it is wonderful to be free.